7 years ago, something terrible happened. It was called the Day of the Cataclysm. There was a disaster opening the dungeon. On the day of which a large number of people died, everyone called for help, but no one seemed to be able to help them. The story itself tells how one black-haired boy lost his parents on that most terrible day for him. With tears in his eyes, he swore to himself that he would certainly become a hunter and tear monsters to pieces. After those very 7 years, he is sitting in a park where a memorial has been erected in memory of what happened. Cursing everything in the world, he recalls a conversation with his coach, who was supposed to make him a real monster hunter. But something went wrong. He was kicked out and told not to show up at the hunter training center anymore. The guy is at a loss and with the words, "Excuse me?" trying to figure out why he was expelled. The coach explained that it usually takes cadets a few months in the center to awaken their abilities, to become hunters. Continuing to say that the black-haired guy's training period is 7 years, he calls him incompetent, and if he continues his training, it can spoil the reputation of this center. All the following days, the other cadets were ridiculously amazed at how much willpower this guy had, but at the same time considered all his attempts pathetic. Leaving the training, the guy wondered if it was possible that after 7 years of hard work, the stat had not increased. Continuing to think about everything on the bench, he indignantly asks himself how it was possible not to raise at least a little statue. Relying on the fact that the very discovery of unique characteristics and acquired skills did not give the desired result. At that moment, in addition to the guy himself, there was a mother and daughter in the park. Soon the mother wondered if her daughter had forgotten her story about how her father died. To which the child proudly replied with a smile that her father was not a coward, he did not run away, but on the contrary saved people at the cost of his own life. In which the mother agreed and asked what her daughter would do if she ran into difficulties. The girl answered without hesitation that she was ready to face difficulties with her head held high, and was not going to give up. Listening to all this dialogue, the black-haired guy rushed to run. The only thoughts in his head were that he should continue preparing. He shouldn't give up, as the little girl said, because he has withstood all these 7 years of preparation, not that he shouldn't, but that he can't do it for anything. At night, when it was raining, a black-haired guy approaches the door of his supervisor, knocking. A conversation began between the two of them. The black-haired guy asks to give him another chance and help him pass the hunter exam, convincing him that he can't just drop everything and give up. To these words, the coach responds aggressively that allegedly the guy does not understand what is happening and is ready to reimburse half of the amount spent by the black-haired guy. Loudly answering the coach that it's not about money at all, the guy gets slapped in the face. A completely frustrated guy in an unsuccessful attempt, sitting among the garbage cans, asks himself why he doesn't have any talent, why he didn't get it at least a little at birth, that if everything were different, he wouldn't be sitting here now. At one point, the guy will get into a place incomprehensible to him, where a voice tells him that praises his unshakable will. Not understanding who is saying this, and what exactly they mean, the guy loudly asks for help. In response to his screams, the coach comes out into the street again and in the course of his movements, talking about how much this guy bored him. At one point he loses the power of speech and does not understand where the scream comes from, continues to look around the yard in bewilderment, in search of the one who is allegedly being killed. The guy's journey in a world incomprehensible to him continues. He is told that he has passed the selection of the strongest on Earth, and is asked to choose a level. The higher the level, the greater the reward. After choosing the difficulty level, the guy is fully set up to win. He will get to the first floor of a tower unknown to him. Starting the test, which takes place in the desert, a sword falls out in front of the guy and a reward is negotiated. If he passes, he will receive a unique ability. After all these words, the guy flashed thoughts about that he can get what he has been waiting for all these years, right now, by passing this test, the difficulty level of which is the highest. A sand golem appears in front of the guy, with whom you need to fight and withstand a certain time. At a loss how to win, to hold out all this time, the black-haired guy runs away from the golem, then realizes that he will not be able to run for another 9 minutes. Despite the fact that the golem is clumsy and tall, he has a great speed to catch up with the guy at one moment. Again, the conditions are voiced that if the test fails, the guy will die. At one moment, he is overtaken by all those thoughts, all those words that both the cadets and the coach told him. This gives him determination and courage. He wants to prove that they were wrong, that his efforts were not in vain. Realizing that the golem can be defeated, but how? How to get to his course so that he himself is not killed, because this is only one way out to pass the test. Jumping over a sand hill, the the guy manages to knock down a golem. And so, when he is lying down, the guy decides to strike at the core, after which he notices that one blow is not enough, tries to make a second blow with a sword, but unsuccessfully. He was captured and thoughts immediately rushed into his head that everything was lost, that everything that the other cadets and his coach said turned out to be true. After all the flow of negative emotions and thoughts, the black-haired guy throws a sword into the core, as a result of which he was convinced that it was necessary to make a second strike. The golem is defeated. An incomprehensible voice is heard again and stipulates that the test has been passed, 7.5 minutes on the timer. The guy cannot convey those emotions, which he felt at that moment, because he discovered a new ability. He was offered to absorb the shadow sphere of the golem, as a result of which, the guy will become a necromancer. The black-haired cadet understands that those 7 years, which were given to him very hard, still bore fruit. His skill has risen by 7%, the first stage has been passed. The number of souls in possession has increased by 1/5, strength and endurance are doubled. The guy learns that he can absorb any souls and use them as he wants, and when he wants. He is offered to go to the restroom, which, of course, the guy does not refuse. As he stays in it, he notices that all the wounds have instantly recovered, and that there is a bed in the room on which you can take a breath and relax. The guy is freely offered any 5 commands that he can use, but first the question is asked, will I be able to leave this tower at all? The black-haired guy has to rest for another 23 hours and 85 minutes in order to start the next test. At this moment, he chooses one team. A community where he notices the presence of other people who also got here. Many said there that they were not even hunters and that they did not understand what they were doing here. An administrator enters the chat, who immediately prohibits any sending of messages and says that he has a message for applicants who have passed the training test. The guy begins to think that in that message it will be told how to leave this tower and return back. The administrator says that all those who pass the test can only earn points there and which will continue to be used in the market, or transferred to another member of the community. The administrator's announcement ends and removes the ban from the chat. The next moment, the black-haired guy thinks that one sword will not be enough and that you need to go to the store. After all, he has glasses and you can spend them either on water or on ammunition. The guy trains from time to time, because there are other hunters in this tower who have lost their status here. After all, a guy should not think that he is on the same level with them, and that it is necessary to move forward no matter what. And now there are only 17 minutes left until the second test. Noticing the approach of the test, the guy noticed that as the time elapsed, the number of messages in the chat increases. At one point, time runs out and the guy is given a choice whether to start the test or not. As a result, the difficulty level is still high. The black-haired guy gets into the forest, where the test conditions are again voiced. This time, to kill the leader of the orcs in a certain time. Looking around the village, the guy notices that there must be a huntsman somewhere, who, along with the others, has to go hunting in the morning. Realizing the large number of orcs, the guy thinks that it will be hard, that his chances of passing this test may be 0. But then he comes up with one strategy, according to which he understands that only fire will help him. By throwing torches around the village, the guy managed to cause a fire in the village, from which all the orcs raise a panic and begin to extinguish it quickly. Then the guy decides to kill 2 orc workers. Killing one who was taking water from the lake, the guy absorbs the shadow energy of this very orc, but did not notice that a sentry was standing behind him. With fright from surprise, he begins to fight with him. As a result of the duel, the guy wins and all his characteristics increase. Approaching the village, which is increasingly engulfed by fire, the guy begins to fight with more confidence with 3 orc workers, and after which with the last sentry, who left the leader without protection. But as at first it seemed that everything would be much easier without protection, but the leader turned out to be not simple. With his ability to wield fire, the leader tries to burn the guy, but then looks at him with fright and surprise. After all, he is alive. An unknown voice announces that the guy's resistance to fire increases, and that his characteristics increase again. Having cut off the leader's hand, in which he held a staff and could wield fire, the orc rushes to his tent with a cry of pain. The black-haired guy follows him, going inside, notices a picture of the leader hugging his children. At the same moment, the guy is overtaken by thoughts about how his parents saved him 7 years ago, at the cost of their lives. But he notices that a small orc with a blade in his hands is trying to kill him, and immediately the guy takes the life of this little monster. At this moment, noticing everything, the leader runs to kill the guy, but the opposite happened. The test is passed. Reading the chat messages, the guy notices that the number of participants has become smaller, almost halved. His shield is no longer suitable for testing, and that something needs to be done. One of the participants announces to everyone that he has found a way to return home as soon as possible. This immediately interested our hero. It turned out that you can use a letter to the administrator, who will answer any question. After passing the 5th floor, it will be possible to buy temporary return stones, with the help of which, it will be possible to return to Earth for a few days. And from the 8th floor, as it was said, a large-scale expansion of the system will be made. Items will appear in the system that will allow you to finally return to Earth. The guy thinks that if he returns with all his skills, he can immediately become an A-rank hunter. Every time the guy absorbed the souls of fallen warriors, he became stronger. All his characteristics, namely agility, strength, mana, endurance, increased. The guy buys himself a new sword, shield and assassin's cloak for the points earned in the trials. The hero gets into the next test, a duel. He is in a cave and they tell him that his opponent will appear very soon. The guy is determined, he looks around, thinking that the enemy can appear anywhere. And then the moment comes, it turns out his opponent, the Dark Guardian, is his double. The Guardian repeated all his actions. The guy decided to deceive him precisely by showing the weaknesses of fencing. But then I noticed that the enemy began to adapt quickly to everything and become stronger. There is only 1 minute left on the timer. The guy needs to deal with the enemy as quickly as possible. At one point, his hand is cut off in which he held a sword, but his double was seriously wounded. 10 seconds left. At the same time, he decided to kill this monster with a shield, cutting off his head. The test is passed. The guy returns to the restroom again and notices how his previously severed hand has recovered. After the duel, he will get the spirit of the same Black Guardian who was defeated. The level of necromancy increases and the guy learns that when absorbing the soul, he can now get the skill that the soul possessed and use it at his own discretion. The guy opens the community chat again, where he sees a decreasing number of participants each time. And he notices information from one guy that the next test will be in the form of a competition with other players, and thinks for a split second that he himself will need to kill a person. Which, of course, puts the guy in a kind of stupor and surprise. He had fought monsters before and couldn't imagine having to fight other people. It is announced by an unknown voice that the selection of applicants for the next test begins, which is 24 hours away. The next test begins with the fact that the team members consisting of 3 people introduce themselves to each other and indicate their rank. Our hero clarifies that he is not a hunter yet. But soon it will be. One of the players reacts aggressively to this information, because he thinks that the guy will not cope, but will only set up the whole team. The rules of the test are announced, where 3-on-3 teams appear. And which will cope with everything faster will win. The gates of the citadel are lowered and goblins immediately run out of there in a formation and attack one participant who was walking first and asked our hero not to get in the way. Looking at the whole situation in surprise, he asks for help from a girl who specialized in support spells, but she replies that she has almost spent all her energy and asks to wait a little. The black-haired guy stands silently and watches all this, but at one point decides to take action. The girl asks him who will cover her from the rear, to which he replied that he would be back soon. In the subsequent time, our hero, using speed and agility, easily copes with each goblin. All the other players look at the whole thing with surprise and cannot understand. As a cadet, he was able to deal with everyone so easily and quickly and save the life of a bully, one of the participants who thought he was the strongest. When his weapon was knocked out, the guy arrived in time and was able to fully deal with everyone. The guy after this fight increases all his indicators and characteristics, strength, skill, mana, agility and speed, everything has completely doubled. Absorbing the souls of the deceased goblins, the guy gets a new skill, an increase in the view and now can easily notice all approaching objects. But Lee Sung-hoon laughingly said that he was just lucky and that it would be harder from now on. To which the guy replied that from now on the management of the team takes under his leadership, that it would be better this way. No one was against it. The guy told Lee Sung-hoon to just protect the huntress who specializes in spells. Continuing the further passage of the test, the guy killed goblins and absorbed their souls, thereby increasing all his indicators. The team notices that goblins are already lying dead in one village. Apparently they were neutralized by another team, that the blood after the murder is still warm. This indicates that they were killed recently, and that there is time to catch up with those players. Otherwise, the guy and his team will lose. And the loss is calculated as death. Of course, none of the three of them. Further, the alignment of events is as follows. The other team finishes the fight with the goblins and is very tired. Their leader tells one to open the door where the main boss is. But after all they have done, they notice how another team is coming to meet them. Where is our hero? Discussing the whole situation, they realize that now they would have to fight against humans, not goblins, which of course is not particularly pleasing. The cadet asks Lee Ha-yun to cover for him and strengthen his characteristics, which will last 10 minutes. And if he is in danger, he will make it clear that he needs help. The guy is sure that his skills and abilities are not those possessed by an ordinary hunter. They are much better. Using their full speed, the other team creates a shield to repel the attack. But the guy easily destroys it and starts fighting with 3 opponents at once. At the moment of fighting with the leader of the other team, he notices that that guy has the vision of a blade looking at him, and that he can repel attacks during. To which the cadet decided to close the blade with a shield and strike. As a result, all opponents are dead and the winning team member is awarded bonuses for successfully completing the test. Lee Ha-yun notices that the guy's hand is shaking. And then she decides to ask the guy if he's alright. The guy says yes. But the girl realized that he was shocked by what he had just done, because he had committed a murder. Even if it is unintentional, but they are still people, not goblins. The cadet asks the rest of the team members if they are ready to enter the main boss. To which everyone answered yes. That they want to finish this test as soon as possible and go to rest. The Goblin King appears in front of them, and our hero easily copes with him. Looking at the whole picture, one of the players, Lee Sung-hoon, tells himself with conviction that this is not a hunter, but a monster. The test is completed. Before returning to his room, Lee Ha-yun convinces the cadet that he did what he had to, because they could have been in their place. After all of the above, Lee Ha-yun sends an application to the cadet's friends, which is where everything actually ends. The guy left alone thinks whether he needs to absorb a human soul or not, because it has its own skills that could greatly help the cadet in battle. After a little thought, he absorbs the soul and returns to the room. Everyone is in the rest rooms to restore the strength spent on the tests. Bonuses are awarded for the successful completion of the task and individual characteristics and skills increase. After all, the cadet looks through the player rating table, changes his nickname, and starts looking for himself. As a result, he took the 16th place, under the name Hunter. This is the nickname the guy chose for himself. It is announced that the first 5 people on the list will be called pioneers and will have advantages on the 8th floor. If the player is able to keep his place within the top 5 up to the 8th floor, then you will receive a privilege, a halo. After that, the hunter chooses which soul he will use and after choosing understands that the forces that he feels are much greater than the others. But this is still not enough, because the guy decided to use all the moments that the tower will provide him, all the souls and all the skills that the hunter deems necessary will be used by him. The guy in the store buys a return stone, with which he can return back to Earth, but only for 3 days. After that, he will be absorbed by the sphere again and taken to the tower. The guy wakes up in his bed and says that compared to the bed in the recreation room, this is a heavenly bed. After that, he notices that it is still possible to take with him to Earth the weapon with which he fought in the trials. Notices that you need to get rid of it, sell it on the market. But then he realizes that in order to sell, there must be a permit that only the hunter receives. But since the guy didn't pass the exam, he can't do it. The cadet decides to take a shower. After everything that happened, he began to smell bad, which he noticed. After the shower, the guy calls his instructor and a dialogue begins between them. The instructor says that the guy can return the application for a refund for training online. Which the guy, of course, refuses and puts the instructor in surprise. The cadet asks the instructor to help him pass the exams, to which the coach sighs heavily and says that the guy did not pass the entrance exams well, and that it was a stretch to get the F rank. The coach does not want to do this, but then after saying the guy's words that he can return the money, because they are not superfluous, the coach agrees to give him an exam today. After that, the cadet notices that the proportion of his body has changed, it has become bigger and stronger. From what I was surprised. Leaving the apartment, the guy notices a neighbor, and he immediately remembered all this everyday life, which made him feel good. The neighbor was surprised that the guy had become so tall and even wondered if he had been like that before. The cadet tries to catch a taxi, but no car stops. Then he decides to use his speed. Running into the hunter training building, the guy meets the instructor. It seemed to him that about 100 years had passed, and not some 4 days. They are approached by an examiner who will take his hunter exam today. Continuing to tell all the information, he focuses on the fact that the guy will not have to pass the interview in theory. At the request of the instructor, the examiner asks if the guy has any questions, to which the cadet replies that he is well aware of how the exam is going. The examiner asks you to follow him and start the exam. The instructor, talking to the examiner, asks him to do everything possible to get the guy expelled. To which he replies that all the monsters with the worst compatibility for the one who will take this exam. While the guy is preparing, the examiner asks the cadet to choose a difficulty level from 1 to 10. Remembering the past, he always chose the first level, but there is an explanation for that. He was weak before, and not what he is now. Interrupting the instructor, who wanted to say that he always chooses the first level, the guy chooses the maximum difficulty. From what the instructor was shocked. The exam begins. The opponent is a firebird. With the help of her skills, she slows down her movements by 25%. The guy notices that his sword is slightly cracked. The instructor tried to do this because he doesn't want this guy to pass the exam. At one point, the instructor remembered the past, how he was the same cadet, how he took the exam with his friends, and how everything changed in one moment. It seemed to him that as soon as he became a hunter, he became the best. However, such were the situations that Huang Man-ho, the instructor, began to move away from his peers. This connection that was between them was beginning to increase. And in the end he was left alone. He accepted that the world of hunters is based on innate talent, and stopped changing anything. He said that people are forced to give up when they feel a wall in front of them that they cannot overcome. Not only he did this, but everyone. And so he decided that it was also time for Han Song-yoon to give up and stop trying to change something. When the firebird started attacking the guy, and trying to repel the attack, his sword cracked. He thought that if this is a low-level weapon, then it can't just take and crack so easily. Looking at the instructor, who was smiling, the guy immediately understood everything. He realized that the instructor did not want the guy to pass the exam. But this was only a plus for the cadet. He could demonstrate and hone the new skills that he received during the tests in the tower. Trying to attack the bird, the first time it failed to achieve the desired result. Because the sword was short. The guy took a concrete slab and threw it right at the bird. From which she was killed. The examiner and the instructor did not expect such a turn of events, and were shocked by everything they saw. The exam is passed. After all, the guy receives a certificate that he is a C-rank hunter and can participate in the capture of monsters and the sale of weapons. At this moment, the examiner and the instructor are talking in the room. The instructor was shocked and asks how this could have happened at all. The guy defeated the monster in 10 seconds and that he was assigned the C-rank. The examiner replied that he did not know himself and that the instructor promised him that the guy would not be able to pass the exam. And the fact that he was given this rank is not enough. Because cadets get a D rank in this situation, not a C. But if he was assigned a D rank, the guy could have appealed. The hunter enters the room to them and immediately receives congratulations from the examiner for successfully passing the exam. But the guy starts talking to the instructor and mentions that he also has a C rank and that he retired in this position. To which the instructor began to react aggressively. The guy also touched on the topic that his instructor used to call garbage, but then he decided that it was more suitable for the instructor, not for him. To which the instructor rushes at the guy with his fists, and eventually gets in the face himself. The guy said that he acted as he needed to defend himself and leaves the hunter training center. The examiner stops the guy on the street and says that he did not consider what was needed in him and offers to work in the center for 1 million won. To which the guy replied that he did not want to work with the one who framed him. And leaves. 2 days pass and the news announces that there are rumors about the Tower of Trials. That some people challenge her. The guy knows that time is already coming to an end and he needs to go back to the tower. By selling weapons, the guy earns a decent amount of money. Taking it with him, he returns back to the tower, to the rest room and makes sure that things can be transported between worlds. After returning, the guy gets a new skill, the Eye of Truth. He can get information behind the observed target and understand whether his opponents are lying to him or not. Warming up in the room, the hunter prepares for the next test, the 5th level. Buys ammunition in stores for points, a thunder sword, a 10% chance that lightning damage will be inflicted when hitting an enemy. Hunter Scout Shield. The next test begins. He needs to kill the werewolf boss. For which, in case of victory, he will receive a werewolf bandage on his head. Victory counts if the boss is defeated or the time, 24 hours, have expired. And in case of failure, death. The guy appears at the foot of the mountain and sees a pack of wolves. He easily copes with them and even says that they are weak. But then about 5 white wolves appear, which, unlike the usual ones, are 25 times larger. This brings interest to the hunter, and one might say, excitement. He's already starting to think that he's starting to go a little crazy. A little time has passed, and those same white wolves are dead. The guy absorbs all their souls and gets a performance boost. Then he observes that the effect of the lightning sword appears extremely rarely. Continuing the test, the guy sees a large number of dead wolves lying down. He thought that the reason was that it happened among themselves, that there was some kind of conflict. But then he notices that the wounds are evenly and neatly inflicted. Someone did it, instead of the hunter. The guy hears a loud call coming from the cave, and then sees how someone threw the dead body of the boss out of the cave. It is voiced that someone killed a werewolf. But this is not a guy, although he should have done it. An analysis takes place, and it turns out that someone has penetrated the test from another world. The guy thinks about the fact that there are apparently other worlds besides his own. The conditions of the test change. Kill the one who invaded the test. A bully in armor comes out of the cave with a sword in his hand and asks the hunter that he is the main one in this test, and how he was able to reach such a level, relying on the fact that the hunter's world is poorly developed. The guy silently looks at the knight, and tries to understand what is happening. A fight starts. The guy tries to hit the knight's armor, but it doesn't work. The knight blocks all attacks. After that, he inflicts heavy damage to the guy. He breaks his arm and flies off into the rock. After all, the guy tries to come up with something and decides to distract the knight with a conversation. He agrees, thinking that the guy will not survive anyway. And he says that he is from another dimension and that he can interfere with the trials of other players by using such an ability after the 8th floor, when there is an expansion of opportunities. After passing the test on the 8th floor, the player can buy a stone that performs these actions, to be introduced into the tests of others. The guy checks his words for truthfulness with the help of the aura and understands that he is not lying. After all, the hunter tells the knight what all this conversation is for. All because the past is a certain time for instant healing. The guy's arm is restored, and again activating his abilities, he begins to use the absorbed souls of deceased warriors and past trials against the knight, from which he was shocked. They continue to fight. The knight cannot understand where the player at the 5th level has so many abilities, because he bypasses him in almost all characteristics. But the armor compensates for everything. The guy can't break through it. This puts the guy in a dead end. But then he remembers that there is a lightning sword ability. The main thing is to strike blow after blow, and the ability will appear. The knight has advantages in attack and armor. After all, one attack can cause a guy a critical level of health, from which it will take a longer time to regenerate. And the trick will work, as before the question. The guy continues to strike blow after blow, and sees how the same bonus from the sword appears. A lightning strike is struck on the knight, which causes him to slow down and then be completely immobilized. The knight is confused as to how this can even be. The guy wonders if the armor had the property of a lightning rod, there would be a problem. But fortunately the risk was justified. The knight lies half dead at the foot of the mountain. The knight starts shouting at the guy that he himself should have won, and not the guy who is on the 5th level of the trials. But where did he get such a large number of skills and such high characteristics, still make the knight stay in surprise and confusion. But the guy says that he is stupid, that he relies only on his only skill and strong armor. The guy is already preparing to finish what he started and kill the knight. But he stops him and offers him that he can answer all his questions. What the guy refuses and pierces the knight's flesh with his blade. From which the knight curses the barbarian with his last breath. That's what he called the guy. The hunter sees that each time it becomes easier and easier for him to kill rivals. After all, if he did it with uncertainty or showed pity, there would be a serious problem. But this is not the case. The test is passed. The guy watches as the knight's body begins to burn with a purple flame, and wonders why this is happening. Absorbing the knight's soul, he learned his name, Cade Adrax. The guy's skill has grown to 15%. The guy almost missed the moment of soul absorption, because he was from another dimension and he would have just burned up in flames and disappeared. The guy wonders why there is no reward for the test. And then he realizes that the difficulty and the reward are not the same. There is a review of the award. The guy gets 7,000 points and an additional 3,000 points as a bonus. There is a change of rank from C to A. The guy thinks that such awards are for the fact that the knight was quite strong, and therefore such awards. There is a transfer of the guy to the restroom on the 6th floor. There is a complete healing from all the wounds inflicted during the passage of the test. And it is also announced that this incident will be displayed on the test summary board. Anyway, the guy is still faced with an invasion from another dimension. He is convinced that the Tower of Trials can really take him by surprise. The guy tried to keep the tickets for sending questions to the 8th floor to the maximum. The current number of tickets is 5. He wants to ask what a floor-by-floor implementation is and whether it is possible to find out in advance about the impending invasion in order to somehow prepare and be aware of events. Having written all this in a message to the administrator, the guy sees that the message has been delivered and now he only needs to wait for a response. Response received. The guy is surprised. It says, floor implementation is a system that allows you to enter the trials of other players with whom there is a gap of no more than 10 floors. However, it is possible to invade only personal tests. Penetration into special and combined tests is impossible. This is a system that expands after passing the 8th floor of the tests. But currently this modification is not available to the guy. This can be considered that it is possible to break the ladder to another player, if, of course, you want to surpass the player in characteristics and skills. In the end, to kill the player. The guy wanted to know more, but since his level does not meet the requirements, all they can give him, or rather they gave him, is half the answer to this question. Since the request was satisfied, it is not possible to send a repeat question. And the guy understands that even in sending questions there are rules. But since he was refused, it was not regarded as a wasted ticket to the question. Which, of course, the guy was happy about. Now he plans to use the items he brought with him from Earth, opens inventory. The guy is offered to use such a service as the recovery chest of the Kraken Magic Tower to restore the shield of the Secret Hunter, which was broken in the battle with the knight. You can use it only once. The shield has been restored. The guy uses a purity stone, because there is no shower in the room. For a split second, he thinks that this is a waste of money, but still it is much better to enter the battle cheerful and with a sense of freshness than without all this. Level 6 trials will begin in 1 hour and 12 minutes. The guy realizes that he still has time and decides to look at the results board, where he notices that he is in 3rd place. He rose quite high from the 11th place to the 3rd. He asks himself if this brings him closer to the possibility of obtaining the Pioneer's assets, but realizes that he learns all these possibilities only on the 8th floor. Then there is an entrance to the community. The difficulty is high. Next, the guy notices that one of the players is making an announcement about the sale of a way to get a mental resistance skill, which will be very useful in murders and robberies. If someone has such a mental resistance skill in their arsenal, they will be able to earn achievements related to murders, robberies, and betrayal, while receiving pretty good rewards. Something inexplicable started happening in the chat. Everyone went crazy. One of the players started saying that they were doing inexplicable things, selling skills on murders and robberies. Although he himself passed the 4th level, where the essence of the test was to kill. This skill has an attractive effect that reduces the mental shock after the murder. Even if every time you use this skill, it can't change the essence of the problem, the guy thinks. One player informs everyone that he noticed that the other person who made public the information that on the 4th floor of the tower, the essence of the test was to kill each other. And then he changed his nickname to Sooty Gonyu. And since the trials will be between hunters, does this not mean killing each other? The guy thinks that that player deliberately spoiled the atmosphere on the 4th floor, and nobody knows whether to consider it true or a lie. Therefore, the hunter decides to remember the new nickname of that guy just in case. And he begins to think that this time it will be the same. An unknown voice asks everyone if they are ready for a new challenge, on the 6th floor. The test of the 6th floor begins. The difficulty is high. The theme of the test is occupation. The time before the test is 50 minutes. The conditions for the failure of the test are the death of the applicant, or the expiration of the issued time for passing the test. The reward that players can get for successfully fulfilling the conditions is a random chest. And as usual, the penalty in case of failure is death. The guy goes to the test. This time he gets to some kind of sea. There are points in the sea that are connected by bridges. The selection of applicants has been completed. The essence of the test is to work together with other players. The hunter stands alone and thinks, why don't other players appear? But at one moment someone falls on top of him with a spear pointed at him. The guy grabs this spear and brings it down on the very platform of the appearance of the players and asks what he is doing. To what does he answer? What did he read at all? What was written in the community? Looking around, the guy realized what was going on. All the other participants started killing their team members. Because this is the easiest and fastest way to get an achievement. And they do it because, so the tower has created all the conditions for others to start doing so. The guy is watching one couple who are standing on the next platform. It seems that at first they behaved normally and adequately. We have already, as it were, concluded cooperation. But in the end, one of them killed the other, and for this he received an achievement, a vile killer, and increased his strength by 1 point. Watching all this, the guy who was lying on the platform noticed that the hunter was distracted and tried to kill him. Not knowing that the hunter has significantly higher performance indicators and better skills. Using his speed and agility, the hunter easily copes with the guy. Thus, getting an achievement is a traitor and increases strength by 1 point. The hunter decides to continue the test further, but to keep an eye on those players who decide to attack him. It sounds quite tempting to kill a couple of people, replenish your piggy bank of skills and get even new power ups and performance upgrades. But he's not going to kill on purpose because of all this. The guy sees how another player, having successfully mastered the magic of water, creates an iron dome over himself. A kind of protection. But that guy was standing on the road at the hunter. Laughing with the hunter that he would not be able to break his defense then, with horror and fear, he lay bleeding. Thanks to his sword, the hunter completely coped with it. All the others, noticing the hunter's actions, ran away in different directions. It was thought that he was at the very top of the rank among others. A strongpoint is being captured. The capture may stop if someone from another team is on your territory. You must not allow the enemy to capture your stronghold. The remaining time is 9 minutes and 59 seconds. The guy decided to just hold out for these 10 minutes. Reflecting on the fact that the high-ranking applicants who immediately confirmed their participation in the next test on the 5th floor without using the return stones should already be outside the 6th floor, I watched as others tried to capture the outposts of others. In theory, all the other players are below the guy's rank, so maybe breaking through the test will be easier than he thought. The tests on the 6th floor already make you think about a lot. Distrust of others is the reality of a low-ranking applicant. Darkness and despondency, nurtured by the Tower of Trials. But far-fetched sympathy is real hypocrisy. That's how the guy thinks. Even if someone managed to distract rivals from themselves by switching their attention to another strong point, in the end someone will still die. The guy is informed that someone has entered his stronghold, and the capture is stopped. One of the unexpected guests tells him that he is probably surprised that the team consists of 2 players, and there are 4 of them. The hunter immediately understood who was what. These notorious bastards, who imagine themselves to be a squad of assassins, kill for the sake of new achievements and increases in individual characteristics. But now they tell him that it's his turn to die. 2 of the 4 attack him. One player from the team casts a spell on the hunter, a fusion of hearts. Now Han Sung-yoon shares the pain of challenger Kim Jin-hyun. The same Kim Jin-hyun strikes Han Sung-yoon with the sword blade directly into the palm in which he held the sword. After that, the skill, tolerance to pain, is activated. All types of pain are reduced by 15%. Another player attacking him pours seawater on Han Sung-yoon, and thereby reduces his strength by 10, agility, and endurance by 10% too. The duration of this effect will be 2 minutes and 59 seconds. The guy realized that a fine is due for touching with seawater. This is a terrible alignment for an ordinary player, of course, but not for him. A very good strategy is to deprive the enemy of weapons and reduce its characteristics due to touching the water. But they made one mistake. They chose the wrong opponent. Han Sung-yoon grabbed one opponent by the face and hit the platform with all his might. Everyone else looking at this was horrified. He gets an achievement right away, a one-hit kill. A skill is created, Contempt for the Weak. -1 out of 4. The essence of the effect is that if the opponent cannot surpass any of the user's characteristics, the strength increases according to the difference in characteristics. In this situation, everyone's stats are lower than Han Sano-yoon's, thereby activating this effect. The second player attacks him from behind, tries to strike, but he fails. Han Song-yoon is no longer in that place. By killing the second one, he gets the effect, a merciless killer, dexterity increases by 1 point. Already -2 players out of 4. Those who remained stood and looked at Han Song-yoon with incomprehension as it happens. The leader of this group remembers that the player, the second, who cast a spell on the hunter nearby. He cut off his leg, thereby inflicting pain on Han Sun, which limits his ability to move. Then he begins to threaten him that if he continues to move in his direction, he will kill that very magician. The only thing that pleases the hunter is that he has resistance to pain, so he can somehow move around. But at this rate, it will be hard for him to react somehow to the attacks of that guy. Han Song decides on one single solution, throws a shield at that magician, thereby cutting his throat. From the pain he felt, Han Song falls to his knees and holds his throat with his hands. Noticing that he has fallen to his knees and is weak at the moment, the chief decides to finish off Han Song, but he grabs the sword with his hands and stops it near his face. He says that the feeling of a cut throat is inexplicable, and offers the main one to feel it. Breaking the sword with his hands, Han Song cuts off the head of the last opponent with a quick movement. Gets a new achievement, a cold-blooded shredder. Earns 1500 points. Time is up. The stronghold has been captured. Not all players became so hypocritical and killed their players who were with them in the team. Everyone started rejoicing and even hugging, because together they fulfilled and coped. This is the most important thing. There were also exceptions. Some sat in shock looking at the body of the player they killed. They attributed it to the fact that such a test, that without it would be impossible to continue passing the test. It's either you or you. A clear example of what happened in this trial. Han Song wondered if he looked like the same monster as the ones who killed the other players. Even if he killed for protection. Everyone is congratulated on the successful completion of the test on the 6th floor. A random drawing box will be sent to everyone's inventory as a reward for winning. Plus, everyone was given 8,000 points. There is a move to the restroom and waiting for the next test. Han Song, as always after a battle with other players, absorbs their souls. Absorbed the souls of 4 players, Lee Songjun, Kim Jin-hyun, Wook Songjin, Han Sukjun. Mastery of a unique characteristic, necromancy, reaches its maximum value. This increases the rank of necromancy by 1 level, necromancy D. The entrance to the waiting room of the 7th floor is carried out. The achievement viewing function is activated. The guy observes that he has a class S, which he is very happy about. He chooses class C and studies. An achievement is awarded for killing an opponent with 1 blow. As a reward, the player receives a skill, Contempt for the Weak. The merciless killer is class E, assigned to those who commit a consistent murder of applicants without hesitation. As a reward, the player's dexterity increases by 1 point. A cold-blooded shredder is class D. An achievement is assigned to a player for killing 5 or more applicants in a test, and receives 1500 points as a reward. In fact, Han Song received a large number of points for this test. And it turns out, thereby the player earns achievements, various awards, skills or stat increases. The guy opens the inventory. As it should be, there is a random chest in it. By opening this chest, it is possible to obtain weapons ranging from rank F to rank B. Han Sun opens the reward and a small goblin-like creature flies out of there. He calls it Pokemon, and wonders if it is possible to catch it. Trying to catch him, even though he has high agility and speed, he does not succeed. But at one point, Han Song still had the opportunity to grab him, and he took advantage of it. The Pokemon bit him for this action. As he said, Han is sleepy, despite the fact that the Pokemon is cute. Now he will treat him much tougher. Picking up speed and swinging his fist, Han Song hits the Pokemon right in the head. From what, it breaks like a glass vase. Here he is congratulated for having pulled out an item corresponding to the highest class in a random drawing box. Han Song thinks that if the highest, then it means only one thing, Class B. A forged iron suspension falls out of the class. A steel pendant imbued with the soul of a blacksmith who has been working with iron all his life. Increases the effects of metallurgy and swordsmanship skills by 7%. When mana is injected, an exclusive effect is activated, mana is consumed, there is no time for recovery. Steel protection? Han Song asks himself. The wrought iron suspension activates an exclusive effect, steel protection. The skin absorbs 10% of all physical damage. Increases the effect of the sword skill by 7%, absorbs 10% of physical damage. It turns out that this subject has much steeper parameters than most A-class subjects. It is equipped with both attack and defense, a truly fraudulent item. The guy really did not expect such a subject. He thought maybe some of the lower classes would fall out there. And here's the jackpot. The guy puts on an amulet, and is informed that all mana is exhausted. Exclusive effect of forged iron suspension in class, steel protection, disabled. Han Song notices that this object instantly absorbs mana. He decides to save and accumulate mana, so that he can then use this item in critical situations. Then the guy decides to check the status window of a unique characteristic that has been recently assigned the rank D. The guy is asked if he is ready to start the test on the 7th floor. He is surprised that he was offered this now, because usually after the test the time is given about a day, but here immediately. But as he says, if they offered to start right now, then there is nothing wrong with that. But he wonders. Have others also lost the time allotted for waiting? There is an entry into the community. The difficulty is high. Did you guys know that the waiting time has disappeared? One player asked. And here the guy realized that everyone can now start the task immediately. A dialogue on this topic began to take place in the chat. Someone called it some kind of mistake in the tower. Someone said that if you immediately take advantage of the opportunity, you will then have an advantage over others. Some said it was better to prepare for the test for a couple more days, and then start. But Han Song decided to pass this test as soon as he was offered. The guy decides that no one cares about everything, that time has been wasted waiting. No one is particularly interested in the benefits, there is an atmosphere of desperate desire to return home in the community. One of the reasons for this desire may be that some players have low hunter ranks. And compared to the 6th floor, the manner of communication has changed a lot. Because of one guy who said before the trial that it was easier to earn new achievements by killing, he created all this chaos, thanks to which many suffered. Many showed their real face with such actions. But there was a high chance of losing. After all, these are people, not monsters. But it seemed that this situation showed the opposite. At the moment, all these maniacs have subsided, they were not heard in the chat. One of the players offered to find them and kill them, but the next test will be individual, and it will be impossible to do this. We should also be wary of those homicidal maniacs who use the lives of their comrades as simple tools for profit. And most importantly, Han's son needs to develop skills that will not be shaken by any variables. Han Song decides to check the status window of a unique characteristic, level D Necromancy. Description of the unique characteristic, Necromancy D, skills 0%. Basic effect, a guy can absorb the souls of the dead to strengthen and supplement either stats or mana. Additional effects, Han Song can constantly increase his stats, and the numerical value will be directly proportional to the attribute rating and the quality of the absorbed soul. Additionally, the soul can be stored and used if necessary, and the storage capacity limit is proportional to the rank of the unique characteristic. When absorbing the spirit of the deceased, there is a certain probability that one of the skills imprinted in the soul can be acquired. Han Song can use the soul of the dead to protect the body, but at this time the amount of energy consumed by the protective shell is proportional to the force of the blow. It turns out that the guy finds out that more specifics have been added. If earlier the main emphasis was on strengthening stats, now souls can be used both as magical power and as a protective shell. Han Song hoped that something like an increase in the probability of obtaining a skill would appear. Of course, anything could happen, so his body protection ability would never be superfluous. The guy pulls out a sword, scrolls it in the air, saying that it's time to check how effective the spiritual shield is. Han Song is thinking of cutting off his hand. Everything in the waiting room is fast anyway. You can even say it is instantly restored. Throwing the sword up, and stretching out his hand, the guy looks at everything that is happening. At the moment when the sword tried to chop off the hand, the guy's defense worked. The spirit absorbed the damage inflicted on the user. The soul of the player Wook Song Jin has disappeared. The number of souls in possession is 3 out of 30. The guy was surprised. The efficiency exceeded all expectations. It is better not to use souls immediately, but when necessary, in emergency situations, says Han Song-yoon. The guy opens the board with summing up the results of the tests. He sees that he is in 4th place. Although I used to be on the 3rd. Not so critical, but a little sorry, said the guy. To get him the title of a pioneer, he only needs to be in the top 50 players of the tower. Han Song is tired. After all that has been done and tested, he decides to go to the test. The portal opens. The trial of the 7th floor begins. The difficulty is high. The topic of this test is proof. The remaining time is 40 minutes. The conditions for successful completion of the test are to pass 3 tests in the allotted time. The conditions of failure are the death of the applicant or the expiration of the allotted time. The reward for a successful breakthrough is the A-class Wind Grace skill. The penalty in case of failure is death. Han Song-yoon appears in some kind of building, a kind of temple, where torches are burning and a tunnel leads in an unknown direction. The atmosphere of this test is different from all the others. The guy is annoyed that someone's presence is not felt. Strange, but still. Han Song-yoon notices a blue glow at the end of the tunnel, which increases with every second, up to the impossible inspection of the road. The guy enters the first test zone. He is asked to prove that he has overcome his fears. And at the same moment, the guy moves into the desert. There is no one in front of him, but at one moment a large sand golem appears out of the sand again. Now this space is a reproduction of the training test. The conditions for successful completion of the test are a breakthrough through 3 tests in the remaining time. It turns out that the guy needs to go through the tests that he passed earlier again in the allotted time. Looking at his skills, characteristics, this time he will be able to defeat the sand golem with his eyes closed. But doesn't this mean that Han Song-yoon will be on the 8th floor very soon? This time, the sand golem became 10 times bigger, which surprised Han Song-yoon. The golem tries to deliver a strong punch to the guy, but he fails to do it. Han Song-yoon dodged and using his speed aims to get closer to his head, striking in different places. The guy can't find that very core. Destroying which, you kill the golem? But he's nowhere to be found. Perhaps because this golem is much bigger and the core must be somewhere deep in its body. Han Song-yoon decides to cut his body into pieces. With each blow struck, the golem begins to crumble. Han Song's actions only angered the golem, and he began to attack the guy much more intensively. Dodging a punch is certainly not a problem for Han Song-yoon. But if it is covered by a sand wave, there will be problems. Han Song-yoon is furious after being struck by a golem that he managed to knock the guy down. Han Song-yoon activates the skill, 3 Absolute A-class whose skill is 0%. Basic effect, you need to use mana to strengthen 3 sword attacks. Additional effect, when using the skill, each attack increases the cutting power of swords by 1.5, 2.5 times. Han Song-yoon cuts off the hand of a sand golem with a sword blow. When the guy passed the test, the purpose of which was to kill the main wolf, he fought with a knight. The guy now thinks, was he worth thanking or not? The golem recovers after a certain time using sand. The guy decides to strike as quickly as possible in order to get to the core faster. Han Song-yoon struck 3 blows, after which the golem became twice as small. The guy realized that the resource called sand, which makes up the golem's body, cannot be extracted indefinitely from the environment. That's why it has apparently shrunk so much in size. The guy offered the golem to shrink a little more. The golem was clearly not happy with such an offer. Han Song-yoon cuts the golem across the floors. It fell to the sand and with a loud crash. After that, Han Song-yoon still found the most vulnerable spot, the core. It was on the golem's back, covered with a lot of sand. That's why it was hard to get to him. It's already been about 10 minutes of testing. 40 minutes were generally allotted to complete the test on the 7th floor. And Han Song-yoon decides to speed up. As soon as he started to approach the golem, he tried to hit him, but the guy dodged. He would have played with him more, but unfortunately the guy doesn't have time for games. And with a strong blow, Han Song-yoon smashes the core of the golem that was located on his back. The golem has fallen. Han Song-yoon proved that he had overcome his fear. The first test was successfully completed. After the golem, there was only a pile of sand. A bright blue light appeared behind the guy again. Before leaving this desert, Han Song-yoon absorbs the spirit of the golem. But in the end, he did not succeed, since he was already in the portal. The guy is told that he has entered the second test zone, and he must prove that he has become wiser. Han Song-yoon appears near the very village of the orcs, which is again engulfed in flames. This is the location of the second test, the settlement of orcs. Everything has been proven, all the tests are repeated again. The guy notices a column of orcs who stopped near one dead soldier. Not understanding what is happening, the guy continues to observe further. Han Song-yoon notices that the orc rangers are having a rabies attack. This phenomenon is often observed in monsters seized with anger. An orc in a state of rage is no longer a pathetic monster like an E rank. Han Song-yoon was a little nervous. He enters the camp through the main gate and is immediately noticed by the orcs, and with a roar they rush at him with the whole crowd. And as Han Song-yoon said, orcs should not show the pain of losing a family member. The skill is activated, instant acceleration. The skill is activated, 3 is absolute. Accelerating, the guy rushes into the crowd. And in the end he slaughtered everyone, but one orc in front of him is on his knees and holding on to the sword. Han Song-yoon asked the orc, "Is it nice to watch all the way your family is being killed, and you yourself are not able to do anything?" He rushes at the guy with red eyes, swinging the weapon and trying to strike. But the result was clearly not in his favor. Han Song-yoon uses his speed to quickly chop off the head of the last remaining orc. The guy proved that he became wiser. The second test has been successfully passed. He immediately takes the souls of the dead orcs, before the teleport appears. The guy completely absorbed all the spirits of the orc rangers. Skill increased by 6%. The number of souls in possession is 20 out of 30. Mastery of the skill, Dagger Hunter E with a plus has reached 100%. The Hunter's Dagger skill has been upgraded to rank D. Mastery of the D-class Instant Acceleration skill has reached 100%. The Instant Acceleration skill has been upgraded to D rank. Han Song-yoon entered the third test zone. He is asked to prove that they have overcome their doubts. The guy again finds himself in the middle of the sea, as well as on the test of the 6th floor. On one of the platforms. Han Song-yoon thought that he would appear again in the cave with his double. But for some reason he was sent to this place. The guy does not understand what is happening and according to what scheme all these teleportations occur. Han Song-yoon opens the inventory and takes the potion of life, the potion of recovery, made from special water filled with the wealth of life. When taking the potion, 20% of the lost physical strength and magical power is restored. Drinks and throws the bottle into the sea. All platforms begin to rise into the air. The guy activates the exclusive effect of the killer's cloak. Movement speed plus 15. The remaining time is 52 seconds. The guy decides not to waste time and starts running forward. Here he is visited by thoughts that the tests that have been reproduced so far have repeated the existing rules. So, in order to pass this test, Han Song-yoon needs to find and occupy the red tile of the strong point. And until then, in no case can he come into contact with water. After all, then he will receive a penalty and his speed, along with agility and strength, will lose a certain number of points. The guy's speed is higher than the wave's speed, which follows it. And not understanding what is happening at a certain moment, the guy throws up along with the platform. He touched the water of the test. The power is reduced by an act. Dexterity is reduced by 10. Stamina is reduced by 10 points. The duration of the fine is 2 minutes and 59 seconds. The guy hoped that all the tiles would be positioned as in the beginning, before covering them with a wave. But for some reason everything happened differently. I thought there was common sense in this tower, but as it turned out, it's not here, says Han Song-yoon. The guy uses the skill, instant acceleration, and breaks forward from behind his going wave. He did not expect that he could die in such a place. In this trial, jumping from one tile to another, which are in the air because of the flow of water that lifted them there. The guy keeps running on. And he notices that very red platform. The red tile of the reference point. And thoughts visited that soon this test will end. But now it's not the wave that's going after him. And the coordinating movement is a jet of water, which overtook him in front of this red tile.